The truth will set you free. The truth will set you free.
Hey guys, Peter Franson here from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Right now I'm going to attempt to examine the Bible and dissect some of the churchy language we can really easily take for granted, digging into history and languages as I'm able anyway to try and get at the heart of the text so that we can hopefully see and then apply at least some of what God has for you and I in these words today. Now, I'm not formally trained in Scripture. I'm just a guy using resources and a questioning mind to try and get at the truth, and that's something that we can all do, so I hope that you will do that with me. We've been studying our way through the book of Proverbs and have arrived now at Proverbs chapter 8, verses 22 through 31. And in the ESV that reads, "The Lord," or Yahweh is what that word is in Hebrew when it's in all caps, "Yahweh possessed me," this is wisdom talking, "Yahweh possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up, at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth. When there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped. Before the hills, I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the fountains of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the children of man." Verses 1 through 21 of Proverbs 8 showed that wisdom is calling out to us, and we would benefit from pursuing wisdom in response to that call. Now in verses 22 through 31, the personification of wisdom is still speaking, and it would seem that the author is pointing out that wisdom is also worth pursuing because it's an essential trait of God and a foundation for his creation of the world as we know it today. Verses 22 through 26 again, "Yahweh possessed me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths I was brought forth, when there were no springs abounding with water. Before the mountains had been shaped, before the hills I was brought forth. Before he had made the earth with its fields, or the first of the dust of the world." Wisdom is not something Yahweh has acquired or developed over time like we do. God had wisdom perfectly in his being eternally, so that it was present with him when time began. Yahweh's act of creation and other actions since are not random or petty, but are done with intention and complete understanding. So everything in creation, including humans, is infused with wise purpose and intentionality. This includes those realities far above and beyond what we can see as we look to the sky, and realities hidden deeply beneath us on the earth. God has purpose for created things that we actually may never even learn. We don't know. And nothing that exists is without purpose. Everything that God created was brought into being out of God's wise intentions. Verses 27 through 30 again. In the ESV says, "When he established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. When he made firm the skies above. When he established the foundations of the deep. When he assigned to the sea its limit, so that the waters might not transgress his command. When he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was beside him, like a master workman, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always." Verses 22 through 26 show that wisdom existed as part of God's character before anything was created, and so served as part of the foundation for all God's creative work. Now in verses 27 through 30, wisdom is shown to have been present during God's creative and ordering acts. So God did not merely trigger the Big Bang and step away, as the philosophy of deism would claim. But God's wisdom was at work while created matter developed and organized into the world as we know it today. The language regarding the mechanical origins of creation here is loose and poetic, but at least seems to further affirm that God had purpose in organizing and developing the world to be the way it is. And then finally, verse 31. Short verse, but some really significant things in here I think we can observe and reflect on. Verse 31, "Rejoicing in his inhabited world and delighting in the children of man." Finally, in verse 31, after God is done with his creative acts, wisdom is said to be rejoicing in the world now inhabited by humans. Notice that wisdom delights in the children of man, not merely man. Saying man could have referred to humans before the fall, but by saying children of man, we can infer that God's wisdom delights in humans even after the fall. The children, the humans that came, that were the children of Adam, the first man, God's wise purposes are surprisingly satisfied by even humanity in its fallen state. Now, that's not to say that God is delighted by our fallen state, but it does mean that even this present age of fallen humanity falls within God's wise purposes. God exercised wisdom in creating humanity, in allowing us to fall, and he is exercising wisdom right now through fallen humanity's continued activity. In summary of verses 22 through 31, I suspect we are in part meant to infer here that if we want to be in sync with God's foundational and ultimate purposes, and to navigate the flow of this world as it is now, we ought to be pursuing wisdom. Okay, so what's in all this, maybe specifically for geeks? As I reflect on my own tendencies and those of many geeks that I know, there does seem to be an increased tendency toward depression among our particular slice of the global population. Now, it's important to say that if you are experiencing depression that interferes with your life and relationships, that keeps you in a place where you're unable to enjoy anything, or that seems to color every thought, you should look for help from trained counselors and or your doctor. However, it's also important to say that counsel from a non-Christian perspective and medication may help lay a foundation for recovery, kind of help you hit the reset button and clear your mind so that you can do some other really important work. But those things by themselves may also be ultimately unable to help if your perspective on your life and circumstances are not based in truths God has revealed about his character and purposes for this world and for our lives. Without the perspective that God intends us to have, we will always feel pointlessly adrift in a chaotic world. Even lifelong Christians need to constantly be reminded of who God is, who we are, and what this life is about, because it's so easy to forget when the rest of life is blaring so loudly across our senses. It's very easy for me to have a defeated attitude, to reflect on my shortcomings and sins and ask God, why am I like this? Why is the world like this? Why don't you just come right now? I'm ready for this mess to be over. And we're in good company when we have these kinds of feelings, because these thoughts are actually reflected in a lot of the Psalms. But the psalmists also include a perspective that's good for us to repeatedly adopt. They remember that God is wise, good, and his thoughts and plans are far greater, more complex, and worthwhile than we can even come close to fully grasping. In those world-weary moments when life seems pointless, instead of merely trying to drown those thoughts and feelings in our geek hobbies, we can find increasing hope and contentment in knowing that God has allowed the world and even the hard parts of our lives to be what they are for a wonderful and wise purpose, one that we may not be able to guess at right now, but that will be celebrated as more than worth it all in God's future kingdom. Summer insanity.
Liberate butter.
If you'd like some help finding a good church in your area, I would love to help you do that if I can. Online resources and communities are good supplements, but by nature they just can't speak to your particular situation like relationships in a local church can. The context for almost everything in the New Testament assumes that we're serving and building purposeful relationships in a local church. So whether you're in a church that just kind of lacks Bible-based intentionality, or maybe not attending any church at all, if I can help you get connected to an authentic, compassionate, Bible-oriented church, I want to do that. You can email me at paeter@spiritblade.com, and we can look at some websites of churches in your area together.